at war with the 20th century.
It is we who must choose between evil and good.
The question is, did he see something that many of us are missing? Is he lost, or are we lost for not hearing him?
He's a king. He's the chief priest of the Christian church.
There is something that happens when we see this Pope. I'm seeing Peter.
John Paul II came to the papacy at the age of 58, bringing with him more expectations, more hopes, more faith in his capacity to do something utterly transformative than any single public figure in our century.
When Karol Wojtyła was elected, he was greeted as the first modern man to become Pope. He was the skier, the actor, the playwright, the poet, the man who had lived through World War II, the man who knew communism, the man who seemed to know the world around him and to have swum in it, to have lived in it.
He was a very masculine figure. Warrior popes of the Renaissance, a man who wasn't a soft Italian priest who'd come out of the perfumed shadows of a church somewhere, but he was a vibrant, macho personality.
It's the first pope in history where we see his feet. We see his brown loafers. In Italy, we never see the feet of Paul VI, of John XXIII. It was always a very high, and now we see a man who comes, who stands very firmly.
On one occasion he marched in, sopping wet, skirted up his cassock, took his shoes and socks off, squeezed the water out of the socks and hung them on the radiator. And he said, "Gentlemen, shall we get down to business?" And they were just so entranced by a bishop with balls.
In the beginning, he did seem to be a pope for our time, but he would soon emerge as a man at war with the 20th century, a man of extremes, provoking extreme reactions.
I really feel sorry for, my brothers and sisters, my former brothers and sisters in the Catholic Church, because this Pope is killing them. He's destroying their religion, he's destroying their belief, and he's destroying their faith.
He has taken every question this age asks, and he has answered it, and he has answered it fully. It calls out to the heart. 1,000 years from now, people will look back and they will say, this was the age of John Paul the Great.
John Paul is a very holy, charismatic man who is doing a very good job of bringing down the church as we know it.
Well, the man is nothing but contradictions. He's the most political pope in modern history, but he won't allow priests to be in politics. He is devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary. She's at the center of his piety, but he's suspicious of women as equals. He's contemptuous of especially contemporary consumerist culture, and yet he's the master of the consumerist media and has become a world celebrity because of it. He's an anti-communist, a man who succeeded in helping to bring down Soviet communism, and yet he's profoundly suspicious of democracy. He's a man of tremendous modern sensibility, capable of being at home with rock musicians and young people, and yet he has staked everything on protecting a view of the church that has its roots in the Middle Ages. He's a king, and he's trying to protect his kingship, and yet he's obviously, very clearly, a man who only wants to be at the service of the world.
The story of John Paul II is a journey through the 20th century. Its triumphs and its horrors, its profound changes and deep uncertainties. It is a journey that says as much about us as it does about him. To understand this Pope, we must understand where he came from. The Polish landscape bleeds history. Century after century, under an unchanging sun, these meadows brutally changed hands. Polish, Austrian, German, Russian, finally, Polish again.
Poland was partitioned for 125 years.
The past is ever present. The Poles live in time more than in space.
There is the sense of having been wronged by history.
There is a kind of moodiness, a certain undertone of sadness, melancholy.
This is not a very happy country. The landscape is not very happy.
You're part of a persecuted, run down, dominated, colonized nation.
We think of American history and British history as then, but Polish history is now. They've had such an awful 2 centuries.
The salient moments of Poland's past are for most people those disasters, the disasters of the last couple of centuries, the disasters of the Second World War, the disasters of the uprising, the whole martyrology of people who were sent off to Siberia and chain gangs and things for being patriotic. And I think that the Polish psyche, the Polish psychological landscape is peopled first and foremost with martyrs. I think that the Pope feels the collective experience and the collective suffering of the Polish nation in his bones. And I think that this disposed him to glory in suffering. Poles are quite good at seeing the grandeur and the glory of a complete catastrophe.
In Poland, the dead are not dead. There is an intimacy between the dead and the living. And no other country is so gripped by its Catholicism.
It's a Catholicism which broods on history. Poland is the collective incarnation of Jesus Christ. It is the will of God that Poland should be put to death. It should go down into the darkness. And then, on the 3rd day, to rise again, to be resurrected and to bring about the salvation of all nations through its sacrifice. The nation was sacred.
Religion is more than just religion. It's a key to who they are.
Poland's very roads are sacramental byways. Religious processions last for days as Polish priests and pilgrims reenact Christ's birth, his betrayal, his crucifixion. Here, Poland's suffering is given meaning at last.
Imagine what it must be like to be a thoroughly modern man, with an immense command of languages, quite widely traveled, who reads a great deal, who's thought a great deal, and yet to emerge from a type of Catholicism that seems light years away from modernity. And I think that a lot of what is mysterious to us in his personality is explicable in terms of his attempts to heal that gulf.
Born in 1920 in the shadow of the Great Tatry Mountains in southern Poland, Karol Wojtyła lived his childhood days enthralled to the green countryside and the distant white peaks. He grew up in Wadowice, a small market town at the foot of the mountains, with his mother, father, and older brother Edmund, in a modest apartment just across the square from the church.
Wadowice before the war was a town of 10,000 people. It is situated in the mountains not far from Kraków, about 50 kilometers. We were always running to church, and in church we were praying, usually to the Virgin Mary. Then again, at 1 o'clock we were meeting on the main market square.
Every time we got together, we used to sing these songs from our youth. Island songs, camp songs, scout songs. His voice was very beautiful, and he would tap his foot to add a beat to the songs.
When he played goalie, he was like a lion in the front of the cage. He was handsome, he was well-built and very athletic.
We admired his discipline, the discipline that was implanted in Karol by his father. You could see this in his plays, in his football games. He made an appointment with his father at 4 o'clock p.m. So there is the match going on and goals fall. But he, a couple minutes before 4, he would just leave the field. Everyone will be angry, because he was a very good goalkeeper. But he would say, "I'm very sorry, I have to leave, because I promised my father to be home at 4.
Karol was devoted to his parents. His mother was deeply devout and wanted him to become a priest. She was ailing and fragile, but still the adoring center of his life.
Karol's mother died. For him, this was a great tragedy because Karol at that time was only 8 years old. I remember that month of May. We were going to church, so she did not see the first communion of her son, whom she loved very much.
We know that when she died, he was at school, and his father didn't come himself and sweep the young boy up in his arms and grieve with him and weep with him and tell him how much he loved him and how he was going to be there for him. This didn't happen. The father sent word by the teacher, and the teacher told the boy. And we don't know why that is. We do know that he found out in a public way from someone he was not intimate with that his mother had died. And we know from his classmates that he didn't cry at his mother's funeral.
He impressed us with his inner peace. He believed that this loss was the will of God. Wojtyła's flat was on the 2nd floor and the rooms were in sequence. His mother's room was never used after her death. The rest of the family used the one other room and the kitchen. Sometimes when Karol was studying, he would take a break, go into her room and pray. The Holy Father has this special picture, and he always takes it with him wherever he goes. Oh, he never parts with this picture, even when he goes on long pilgrimages. There you can see him